Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Soul Stories with Kate Mazaris. And today we are going to talk about the Scorpio soul story. Scorpio entered, or the sun entered Scorpio on October 22nd at like 11:55 p.m., close enough to October 23rd, and that's the usual date that Scorpio begins is October 23rd and lasts until November 21st. Obviously, the Scorpio symbol is the scorpion that you see here, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But let's talk first of all about how misunderstood the sign of Scorpio truly is. Um, I remember maybe 20 years ago, I was teaching an astrology workshop. And at the time, I was talking about the three water signs, and Scorpio is one of them. It's the fixed water sign. And I had been interested in men who were Cancers and Pisces. And I remember saying in this workshop, "Oh, I wonder what it would be like to be involved with a Scorpio. I'll bet that would be really interesting." And fast forward 15 years later, and I was involved with a Scorpio, and it was the most life-changing experience. And I think that is what the heart of Scorpio typifies. Scorpio energy seeks itself through what it desires and what it transforms. And no other sign of the zodiac has the transformative power that Scorpio does. We absolutely need this energy right now in our world. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Let's take a look real quick before I go to the next slide. We're going to look at the glyph or the symbol at the bottom. It looks like an M with a little tail on it. My husband had one of these tattooed on his chest, and I remember when we were getting to know each other when we were just friends, he thought that astrology was a bunch of BS. And I said, "Well, you're the one with astrology tattooed on your body." He says, "I just like it." And he had a scorpion on his arm, and he just was your typical Scorpio, but he liked the identity of being a Scorpio too. Partly, I think because he liked the intensity of it. And it's one of the reasons I chose this photo of this person smoking and drinking and thinking. And he says, "My biggest problem, I notice everything." And Scorpios sure do. So let's talk about the intensity of Scorpio, the scorpion. Like I'd mentioned before, this is a fixed water sign, meaning it is the sign that's right in the middle of the season. It's right in the middle of autumn, and it is water. You'll notice the three water signs. Cancer is a crab, Scorpio is a scorpion, and Pisces is a fish. These are all things that live in the water. Now, the only difference is that crabs and scorpions can live on the land. Obviously, fish don't, and I'll talk about that symbolism when we get to Pisces in March. This is a feminine sign. Remember, all the water signs and the earth signs are feminine. And this sign is ruled by two planets. It's ruled by Mars, and that was in ancient astrology. Scorpio, the Scorpio sign was ruled by Mars. And once Pluto was discovered, they thought that the energy of Pluto, the symbolism and the metaphor of Pluto, the transformative power of Pluto, the the simple aggression that Pluto can be, obviously goes with the Scorpio archetype. The glyph represents the coils of a serpent with fangs ready to strike. It can also represent the concentrated tension in sexual organs. And a lot of times, Scorpio people will say that their sex drive is higher than normal. I just think they are wired for more intense experience. And sexuality is one of the most intense human experiences we can have. Scorpio takes place in the heart of our autumn. Darkness is dominant and it's increasing. So if you think about with Libra, it started off in balance and then it got darker. Someone said to me, "Well, what about Sagittarius?" I said, "Yeah, but with Sagittarius, it starts dark, it gets darker, but at the end of Sag, the light comes, the light changes." In Scorpio season, there's no light at the beginning in balance, and there is no hope for light at the end. It is darkness. And so, one of the key themes of the Scorpio archetype is learning how to see in the dark. Scorpio energy represents a retreat into hibernation and regeneration. We store our internal energies to cultivate our inner world. And this time of year, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, we are preparing for winter. Animals are hibernating, the plant world, all the energy is going back down into the roots to regenerate, to get ready for a new life in the spring. Scorpio energy works out hidden issues in partnerships and shared resources due to the need for security and self-empowerment. This is one of the reasons that the Scorpio energy is connected to the 8th house in astrology. One of the things I want to point out here is that while Cancer talks about emotional issues, like the emotional human emotional issues, Scorpio is the psycho emotional issues. So they get into the psyche more than Cancer does. Cancer's just the emotions. And then here comes Scorpio with the psychological reasons behind why we feel what we do. This is one thing my husband really had to work on, particularly as our relationship was evolving. He had to work to restrain intense emotions while avoiding repression. And that is very difficult to not repress, because if you repress, then it explodes later on. But to restrain intense emotions so that you're not taking your anger, frustration, whatever out on other people, particularly those that are not the cause of it. And I'm certainly not saying that, Scorpio energy has the right to go out and blast everyone. But a lot of times Steve would be angry at circumstances in his life or at other people in his life. And he would come home and he would be intense with me. And I finally just said to him one day, you need to go talk to those people because I can't hold this space for you. If you feel angry about it, call your sponsor or, call your children to talk about things or whatever, but please don't put that on me. So one of the things that Scorpios also need is a release through transformation and creation. They need to see something change, and not just change for a little while, but to change completely, like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. That's why the archetypes for this sign are the magician and the alchemist, but also the actor, the strategist, the saboteur, and the addict. A lot of times, if I'm doing a reading for someone who has addiction in their life, I look for where the house of Scorpio is in their chart, or I also look for planets or placements in Scorpio. I myself have a South Node in Scorpio and Neptune in Scorpio that are almost exactly conjunct, and where they are in my chart is very significant for the types of addictions I had. I was not addicted to cigarettes or substances, but I was addicted to work. I was addicted to codependent behaviors, particularly where children were concerned, not my children, but others' children. I tried to rescue all children. And that sabotaged me. It ended up taking up too much of my time and my energy. So you don't have to have a sun in Scorpio or Scorpio rising or a moon in Scorpio to have this energy really cranked up in your chart. It just depends on where it is. Let's take a look at the soul journey for Scorpio. It's to transform attachment and orientation of the personality to the purpose of the soul. So, for example, what I watched my husband do over the course of 7 years, we weren't together very long before he passed away. He would talk to me about his ego a lot when we first met, and that was his attachment to his personality. And I think that was the part of him that liked being the screw you, Scorpio. I'm going to sting you because I can. But there are 4 levels to the Scorpio archetype: the scorpion, the snake, the eagle, and the phoenix. And as a Scorpio personality evolves, they move from that attachment to the personality or ego to the purpose of the soul. And when Steve died, I truly believe he was a phoenix. It was not easy for him, particularly because I challenged him to look harder at some of the things that I had done through my own Scorpio journey. One of the things that Scorpios do is that they take on both familial and cultural darkness. They're like sin eaters. I don't know if you've ever heard the the name Sin Eater. They learn to recognize that even in hell or in darkness, there's light, and it's not light you see outside. It's the light within you. It's the divinity within you. It's the source of life that's within you. One of the things I had to teach Steve was to learn to hug his dragons. We all have dragons, and for him, it was like his negative, intense emotions. And he would say to me, I need to keep them in the cage because if I let them out, they're going to hurt people. And I said, Steve, I would encourage you to very gently let them out and ask them why they're so angry. There's a reason why you have these intense emotions, these intense reactions. When you learn to hug your dragons, they aren't dragons anymore, and you change them. And one of the things he learned is that his dragons were actually just those wounded parts of him that would react harshly. And that's a Scorpio's self-defense mechanism. They sting others to protect themselves. Scorpios learn that in the process of transformation, they learn not to abandon themselves, even when they're in relationship to someone else. And that can be hard because they're a water sign. And so boundaries can be a challenge for Scorpios because they want to help everyone, but they also take on other people's energy. Remember the meme in the previous slide. What's my problem? I notice everything. And if they can't manage that energy, then a lot of times they're going to have an addiction to a substance or a behavior because that they can control. If they can't control another person or their environment or their work or stuff that's going on in their neighborhood that's crazy, obviously we can't control things like that. And so if that really bothers a person to not have that control, they're going to get control through an addiction because they'll know where their next cigarette's coming from or their next drink or whatever, even though it is obviously self-sabotaging. Scorpios must learn that there is strength in being vulnerable. And I think that was one of the hardest things for Steve, is that his vulnerability truly was his strength, and his sensitivity and his kindness and his depth of feeling and compassion for others really was, I would call it, his superpower. Scorpios process psycho-spiritual emotions too, so that, they can be really deep dreamers. They are really, really good therapists. I think the best therapists I have ever worked with or among or been in friendships with are Scorpios because they know how to see in the dark, and so they help others. And I'm going to explain that in this picture in just a moment. Scorpios can be determined, forceful, powerful, magnetic, jealous, compulsive, and obstinate. And these are all very intense emotional states of being. But they are one of the most powerfully transformative signs of the zodiac. And what I want to share with you is the painting that's in this slide. This is Persephone and Hades in the bottom right corner. And Demeter, Persephone's mother, is up at the top. Now, if you don't know the story of Persephone and Hades, I highly recommend you read it. But Hades is like Scorpio in this in this glyph, or in this picture rather. Persephone, he steals Persephone, takes her to the underworld, and her mother Demeter is just horrified and sad. And so Demeter takes care of the earth. And with her daughter gone, she doesn't take care of it, and so it withers and dies, and then we have winter. Well, there's a deal made that Hades says to Persephone, well, I'll let you go back to be with your mother. But he tricks her, or so he thinks, into eating some pomegranate seeds, which means that she's going to have to come be with him for part of the year, even though she can be with her mother for the rest of the year. And so, of course, with Persephone coming back out of the underworld, her mother rejoices, and springtime comes. And this is the story of the changing of seasons. The deeper story is that Persephone wasn't tricked into eating the pomegranate seeds. She knew exactly what she was doing when she did it. Because through her relationship with Hades and through experiencing that deep transformative, can't escape it energy, she learned more about herself. She learned to see in her own darkness and to heal it. And so she knew coming back down to be with Hades for part of the year was not a punishment. It was actually a blessing. And one of the things that I appreciate most about my relationship with my husband was that he helped me to see in the darkness of this world that I could not see, the reality of how people can be so cruel and mean and hateful, but that doesn't mean that we have to be. Scorpio energy has hope, even when it doesn't look like there is any. And so he willingly says, go, Persephone, because I know you'll come back to me because of the value of what we bring to each other. So if you know a Scorpio in your life, they are a blessing beyond measure, even if they don't know it yet, even if you don't know it yet. I recently had an experience of working with people in a mental health care facility, and the number one sign of the zodiac that we had as clients were Scorpios. And it doesn't surprise me at all because Scorpios are really willing to look at their issues and challenge themselves to transform. We need a lot of this energy now to look at ourselves to transform, to help the world transform, and to help each other through this very chaotic time in our lives. So thank you for listening to the Scorpio Soul Story. If you're still with me, please subscribe to the channel and share this video with Scorpios that you know and love. I will be sharing a new video on November 1st for the major astrological transits in, um, in November. So feel free to reach out to me if you'd like to schedule a reading or to learn more about my workshops. I'll put all the information about my website in the description below. So happy birthday, Scorpios. I am so glad that you are with us. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Take care.